As well get started. Jen, can you have roll call, please?
Mike Dolson,
I'm here.
Tom McDonald,
Here.
Jennifer Finley. Here. Jim Molitor, Carol Langford, Danielle Matt. Here. Bing Matt.
Here.
James Steele Jr.,
Here.
Martin Charlo,
Present.
Len Tooteeth, Lanice Trahan.
Thank you, Jen. James, will you give us a prayer this morning? No, you did last one, it looked like.
Yeah,
James
I'd be glad to.
That'd be cool.
Test 1, 2, 3. Lemlemshek, Sukali, Kakul, and Sutan. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for our beautiful homeland. We thank you for all of our people. We ask for your blessings upon all of our members of the armed forces, emergency personnel. Keep them safe. And any of our tribal members that are ill or in the hospital, please give them healing. We ask for your guidance over our decisions today, that we make decisions wisely for our people. Lemlips.
Thank you, James. I see we have minutes from November 12th. Park lands conservation. Alco.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, James.
Page 3 of 5, where it starts off with Scott Johnston. Frank Acevedo informed council this week. Frank Acevedo informed council that this project will be going to the Shoreline Protection Board. And then it says Justin McCollum was hired as the ALCO. Alco, no A after ALCO. Thanks. Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the November 12th, 2024 minutes with corrections.
Motion by James to approve the November 12th minutes. Corrections. Martin?
Just one housekeeping. I rejoined the meeting right after the motion by Carol on page 4. I was on Zoom and then I physically came in.
Oh, and I was at a Columbia River Treaty meeting with the Department of State and U.S. tribes. Got a motion by James? Second by Martin. All in favor? 7-4 and 2 abstaining. Jennifer and myself abstaining. We have a agenda. Any other items for the agenda. We have one walk-in. Martin? Oh,
I don't have I just have to leave
oh, okay.
probably after lunch.
Bing? Jennifer? And then I have one for executive we'll take at the end of the day. Danny? Anything else for the agenda? Motion by Tom to approve today's agenda. Second by Jennifer. All in favor? Unanimous. We'll go ahead and start with our walk-in. Come on up, Deb and Mike.
Hello. Good morning, Chairman Dolson and Council. I asked Virgil to join me, and Jennifer sent all of you some graphs that look at land purchases. And when Virgil was working on a project for the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, he hired someone to collect all of this data, to actually go through all the data to look at when the tribe started buying back land, and then he had it categorized into different types of land. And do you want to talk about that a little bit, Virgil?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Tribal Council. This project actually got started several years before Julie and I started working on it. Legal department came in and visited with us about gathering data to support water rights. And they were interested in what the tribes were doing historically with land purchases. So we started accumulating that information from 1913 up until, at that time, around 2000. And we collected information mainly going back through council actions because they were only listed as resolutions, and identified the tracts, classified them as timber, range, home site, whatever we felt was reasonable, why it was probably purchased. When it turned out, when we had the data collected, they either forgot they had asked for it or had lost interest. And so we continued to maintain that when I was at Lands, just because it was handy to know we had a listing of new purchases, as the feed of trust process usually takes several years. It was just a good idea to keep track of it. After I left here, Julie and I were working together on a land history project. And that's when we became interested again, and we recontacted the Tribal Council and Lands to look at completing that project. And we're about 20 years into this now, and we're not done yet. We're getting closer though, because Julie has resurged her interest in it, and she's interested in completing it. We also, on these graphs here, we just have acreages on this by decade. The one you're seeing now is the 40s to the 50s. It was pretty much just range and timberland. But other graphs show different, oops, I'm not very good at this. How do I roll down to the next slide?
Can you use your arrows on the keyboard?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
There. Here's the 50s. Again, a lot of forest land. And Julie brought that up. I'd sent her these slides just to give you guys an idea of the kind of data we had. We do have other data we collected. We collected price information. And of course, a price of land in the 1950s is totally different than it is today. But that also gave a snapshot by decade of what the prices were. And we worked collecting that data, summarizing it. And I guess now I'm not sure what Julie wants to do with it. This is the 60s to the 70s. It gives we used to use it occasionally when membership would perhaps get upset about land purchases. And I remember Mickey several times would come in and say, give me the information so he could come in and share it. And people were, oh, that's what we've been doing since the 20s, the 30s, you know, it's what we do. So he used to like having that information at his fingertips. It'd be nice to have this published in a way that could be useful for the membership and useful for the council as well. This we move up to the 70s to the 80s. The price information, there is confidential issues related to looking at the data and to updating it. It's about 10 years out of date now. I'm guessing Julie would like to take a look at the last 10 years and get that decade also identified. But again, the price is identified and the seller is identified, and that information is generally confidential to the people involved with that. So we had a confidentiality agreement and we never shared this information. I'd be careful with the pricing of it. I mean, maybe by decade it might be appropriate, but it's good to look at and just see what your investment has been.
So my interest, and the reason I contacted Virgil, because we actually worked on this, he was working on it, and I was hired to do the history project with the legislative funding to produce materials for schools. And so I was doing my thing and he was doing his thing, and my office was next door. So I found out what he was doing. So we collaborated a little bit, and I primarily worked on Salish and Kootenai place names, documenting Aboriginal territory. And so with the Kootenai Culture Committee and the Salish Culture Committee, we produced 2 Aboriginal territory maps and a lot of information on that. And then collaboratively, we funded several people to put this on a multimedia platform, which Fire on the Land and Exploring the River were on that same platform. And then by the time, you know, we're getting to completion, schools are saying, that's out, you know, can you transfer it to HTML? But my project was over, and Virgil's, I think, funding from the Indian land tenure was over. And so that project, which includes narratives on the, you know, on everything related to our land tenure, could be, you know, resurrected and transferred to HTML if there was an interest in that or funding. I could talk to Michelle Mitchell about that. She might be interested in it. But for my purposes now, one of the things that happened when I was working on this other project for Michelle Mitchell, I wanted to produce, well, I did produce posters of the tribal council of your guys' portraits and name and date of service. And so I presently have 3 posters. I still have 10 missing photographs that I've been trying to get and put ads notices in the Charcusta. I got one picture, but to accompany those posters, I was going to, at the bottom, you know, highlight, I don't know, 4 or 5 accomplishments of the council during that time period. And so, and then I was going to include Chief Charlo and Chief Kustata, their photograph, and then a piece of the tribal constitution, you know, the part that talks about who our governing body is. And Michelle said, well, I think I'd like you to do something larger. And so could you just, you know, like produce a booklet that would accompany the posters, and schools might be more, a teacher could actually use it as a teaching tool then. So that's what I've been working on, and I've overproduced it. I know. And I didn't start with the Constitution, I started with the treaty and just a brief outline of traditional governance and then how that changed with the treaty. And that began the real intrusion of the federal government in how the tribes governed themselves. And so went through the history of all the Indian agents and superintendents and Commissioner of Indian Affairs and the Business Committee and the Flathead Tribal Council prior to the Constitution. And then up to, I've read the council minutes from 1935 to 1944, and I kind of want to be done. So to find interesting, it's been very, very interesting And in the process, there's always a lot of criticism about tribal government. And I've been guilty of being critical. I think everybody is. We always want our government to provide better services and this and that. We all have our things. But when you go through the history, it's actually quite remarkable what our tribal leaders have always done and continue to do and what they have accomplished. And so I'm at the end of the booklet that's turning into a book where I've gone through the kind of the history of the Indian Reorganization Act, passing the Constitution, the early tribal council years, from reading through those old tribal council minutes, some things of interest, some things of note, some biographies of people. I have Laura Morjo-Matt in there, Pat Left Hand, Mickey Pablo, just some brief biographies. And so I'm at the accomplishments part. And so I'm looking at self-governance, how we've compacted programs, and recovering this amount of land is really an accomplishment. So that's where the other thing, I've just finished the resisting termination part. So, and have gone through the testimony of tribal members in those termination hearings. Those, and there were both sides. There were a few that wanted to terminate, but so I'm now at the land recovery, and I've done conservation achievements, and I can't, that's a whole book. So I've just highlighted things that are very important that the tribe has done. Class 1 air, class 1, water treatment as a state for water quality, and et cetera, the Mission Mountain Wilderness and the Arco settlement and Jocko River restoration and shoreline protection. And so now I'm at the place where I would like to include, I can write something very general about recovering land, and I can just use the land status maps as a pictorial essay and say we were at this percent and now we are here. Or I can provide more detailed information. And that's what Virgil put together, what he spent copious amounts of time doing. So it's really your call, because this information isn't public. If you think it's necessary to include, I can include it. I don't have the dollar amounts, and those are actually in a format that would require purchasing an app and translating that old media platform, but it could be done. But I think it's interesting to look at it, and it's interesting to have. So, now you have it. I think it should be updated and kept current. And I just wanted to say that sometimes when we're living through time and things that are happening with our tribe as a nation, we lose track of that it's historic. And so this is kind of contemporary history, but I think it's really important to have a record of it, even if it's general and not, so detailed. I think it's really important. And I don't think tribal members have access to this. And so, from the treaty to present day, it's not comprehensive. I've been working since February. It's not a dissertation or anything, but it's a really good snapshot of how the tribe has acted with agency over time, really in some quite difficult circumstances, and that because of those actions, that's why we are where we are today. And I hope when high school kids and their teachers go through this, and I hope they do, that kids will feel good about, what our tribe has done as a government, as a nation, as a collective people, that we've really accomplished some pretty remarkable things. And so that's my intention and purpose. I'm very intentional and open about that, because we hear all the negative stuff. Kids don't get a lot of the positive stuff. And then teachers are the other kind of indirect plus that we get, because if teachers use it, then they're learning the information too. So I can, Virgil's willing to share this with me. I could work with Lance to try to get it updated. I could certainly, on my own add the bison range acreage and, a few things that I know about that Len shared with me in an interview for the book. So that's what I'm asking. It's really your prerogative what you'd like to do. But the information is there. I can include it, or I can write this section in a very general way. So that's why I'm here. It's not public, but now at least you have the graphs. So.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Julie, I think all of the information that you just mentioned is important. It's extremely important. I think in 50 years from now, when we have our membership doing history on us, that's the kind of information that needs to be published.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to commend you both for taking the time out of your lives to work on a project like this, because this is extremely important. And I would support your request.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yes, I support your request too, Julia, and I thank you so much for what you're doing for our tribe and for both of you for doing projects of historic importance to our people. And people don't always understand how important it is until sometimes years later. But it really is important. And I think we're the only tribe that I know of that's doing a project like this. Because you can go online and you can learn about the presidents of the United States. You can even learn about the governors of Montana. And I think our government is more important than the government of Montana because they're a state, we're a nation.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're doing is a project that's worthy of documenting the history of a nation. And I really someday would love to see at least a 2-year degree at Salish Kootenai College in Salish CSKT history, not Indian history, CSKT history. And I think that these materials that you're creating would be part of a course on the history of CSKT because it's worthy of that. It's worthy of at least a college degree in our own history. Because as we move forward in talking about tribal justice, who is an expert on CSKT justice, the traditional justices of our people? And when I did my doula training, one of the questions I had is, what are the traditional birth practices of our people? How did people name each other? And what were the rituals and what were the beliefs they had about bringing a baby into the world and treating a new mother? And so, I mean, there's so much that could be in a course of history of Confederated Salish and Kootenai people, of our own history in a degree. And I think the materials that you're creating, when I think about them, I think they're probably more important to adults. Because a lot of us went to school here on the reservation where it was very racist, where we were the minorities in our own school. And our history was not taught. And when people talked about Indians, it was never anything good. And so we're just supposed to just know this from how, I don't know, but we're expected to know things that were never taught. Mm-hmm. And now you're giving our people materials so they can learn about themselves and their own beauty, their own magnificence, and their own historical power. And I think that is so important. So thank you so much for this work that you're doing.
Well, I'm learning a lot. So I've been reading through the land claims and the erroneous survey testimony, and I think it's so interesting for, I didn't know it, so I'm reading all the old documents and the testimony. But the fact that the tribe held that money in escrow, trying to get the land back, 15,000 acres, in the southwest corner and up by the lake. I just think those kinds of things show young people and the membership how tenacious our tribal leaders have been, and that they held out and tried to get the land. And every person that got up and gave testimony said, we don't want the money, we want the land. And most of this land is Forest Service land. So could you at least exchange that land? And then Mr. Meredith, you know, the powers that be ignored what tribal leaders said, but they kept saying it. And they said it in many different ways, both council people and tribal members. And it was very inspiring to read. And so I'm including a lot of primary sources like that so that people can read what people said, their voices rather than my interpretation. I'm trying to do a lot of that. There'll be an appendix that will include the treaty and the Constitution, the IRA, the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. Some of the things that I reference in here will be in an appendix if a teacher wanted to use. Teaching with primary sources is good teaching practice, and some teachers do that. So if they want to dive into it, I'm not putting any of the legal things in there. That was hard. I kept having to call up a relative and say, okay, wait a minute, can you explain this to me? But it's been a very inspiring project to work on, and I feel really fortunate that I've been able to do that for a living right now. I mean, it's been really a blessing to learn this stuff myself.
Other thoughts? The only thought I have is each pie looks like it's the same size. That might be a little not accurate to the actual decade in terms of the size and the amount of land was purchased, but I actually support including that, you bet. I'd entertain a motion to do so. Motion by Jennifer to include the land acquisition charts that Virgil has. Second by James. Other thoughts?
Okay.
All in favor? Unanimous. Call him out of the room.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Break.
Before you guys go on break, can we go back into executive?
We will go out of regular into executive and take 10-minute break. Motion by Bing. Approve having December 26th as a holiday. Second by Danielle. All in favor? I think we got a holiday. Thank you.
You tell them all that there ain't nobody getting off early on Christmas Eve, so that's a trade-off. Only if there's a blizzard, right? Oh, well.
We get calls all day long, trust me. I imagine you do too, huh?
Thank you, Renee. It's always good to hear. It's always good to hear. And we will go out of regular back into executive, I guess. Out of exec into regular. We're done.